stream didn't save from yesterday. Chapter 11. Whew. I think to start with today's stream, I'll have a recap of the previous chapter in Dorian and also what I read today in Sapiens. I think I'll begin with Sapiens and then dive into Dorian. So that way it's somewhat continuous in format for today's stream. Okay. Alright. In Sapiens, Yuval examined how science has increasingly become interwoven with technology over time. How technological advances have played an increasingly important role, particularly in military operations. And he highlights the role that technological advances had in accelerating the end of both world wars, World War I and World War II. And yes, I think the trend will only continue. I think that technological advances will only become more important, not just in warfare, but in security as well, particularly national security. Okay, yeah, that was Sapiens from today. I believe the chapter was called Knowledge is Power, and yes, it is. Okay, in Dorian last time, we took a look at chapter 11. And in chapter 11, we hyper-focused in on Dorian, his interests, as well as how his attitude towards the portrait has changed over time. He's become less horrified and I think more proud of his portrait and the way it's changed. That was in chapter 11 last time. Hyper focus on Dorian. So let's take a look at chapter 12 today. Again, guys, I'm sorry that chapter 11 didn't save. Hopefully chapter 12 does today. And in any case, at least we have the recap that I just gave. Okay, here we go. It was on the 9th of November, the eve of his own 38th birthday, as he often remembered afterward. He was walking home about 11 o'clock from Lord Henry's, where he had been dining, and was wrapped in heavy furs, as the night was cold and foggy. At the corner of Grosvenor Square and South Audley Street, a man passed him in the mist, walking very fast, and with the collar of his grey ulster turned up. He had a bag in his hand. Dorian recognized him. It was Basil Hallward, the painter. A strange sense of fear, for which he could not account, came over him. He made no sign of recognition and went on quickly in the direction of his own house. I think this is how some people react to seeing an ex or something. After a certain amount of time, it's like, oh shoot, I recognize that person. It's probably a similar concept. It's like you recognize someone from your past. And in this case, it's the painter that Dorian recognizes. As we recall last time the two interacted, Dorian was asking Basil to reveal a secret, and the secret that he revealed was that Dorian was the source of his inspiration. Dorian, in return, didn't offer any insight into his own secret. He didn't, as we might recall, he didn't want Dorian. Dorian did not want Basil to see the painting. He didn't want the evidence of his wrongdoing to come to light. Okay. But Hallward had seen him. Dorian heard him first stopping on the pavement and then hurrying after him. In a few moments, his hand was upon his arm. Dorian, what an extraordinary piece of luck. I've been waiting for you in your library ever since 9 o'clock. Finally, I took pity on your tired servant and told him to go to bed, as he let me out. I am off to Paris by the midnight train, and I particularly wanted to see you before I left. I thought it was you, or rather your fur coat, as you passed me, but I wasn't quite sure. Didn't you recognize me? I think that the deed is creating somewhat of a rift and division between Basil and Dorian. I think Basil still doesn't know that the painting itself is changed. It's like Dorian said, like, if I share my truth with you, if you share your truth to me, I'll share my truth with you. And Dorian didn't divulge any information. So it's like they didn't see eye to eye then, and they've only grown further and further apart since. Okay. In this fog, my dear Basil, why, I can't even recognize Grosvenor Square. I believe my house is somewhere about here, but I don't feel at all certain about it. I'm sorry you are going away, as I've not seen you for ages, but I suppose you'll be back soon. No, I'm going to be out of England for 6 months. I intend to take a studio in Paris. Shut myself up till I have finished a great picture I have in my head. However, it wasn't about myself I wanted to talk. Here we are at your door. Let me come in for a moment. I have something to say to you. I shall be charmed, but won't you miss your train? Said Dorian Gray languidly as he passed up the steps and opened the door with his latchkey. The lamplight struggled out through the fog, and Hallward looked at his watch. I have heaps of time, he answered. The train doesn't go till 12:15, and it's only just 11. In fact, I was on my way to the club to look for you when I met you. You see, I shan't have any delay about luggage, as I've sent on my heavy things. All I have with me is in this bag, and I can easily get to Victoria in 20 minutes. Dorian looked at him and smiled. What a way for a fashionable painter to travel. A Gladstone bag and an ulster. Gladstone bags are soft-sided traveling bags that open from the top, popularized by Liberal Prime Minister W. Gladstone. I assume it's going to somewhat resemble like almost like a purse or a handbag, what some people might use as an alternative to a travel bag, like smaller than a suitcase, I'm thinking. Let me see if I can pull up a picture here. Gladstone. Hold on, guys. It's named after the Prime Minister. Yeah, these style of bags are old-fashioned. Let me see if I can show you a picture. I don't possess one, but that's what they look like. Yeah, it resembles a handbag or travel bag. I've definitely seen those before, but I just can't remember where I saw them. I think probably in a movie or something, but yeah, my memory's hazy. Maybe Sherlock Holmes or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, hard to remember, guys. Okay, let's see. That's the Gladstone bag. It takes its name from the Prime Minister, W. Gladstone. We can just keep going down the rabbit hole, too. We can check out W. Gladstone. But in the interest of time, I'll just keep proceeding with the story. It seems like the bag itself is more significant than the Prime Minister in terms of the plot of the story. Okay. The ulster is a long overcoat of coarse material, often belted. I think it's gonna look like a trench coat. Yeah, it kind of, yeah, again, it's like Sherlock Holmes 101, guys. It's like that. Okay. Reorient. There we go. Where was I? Come in or the fog will get into the house. And mind you, don't talk about anything serious. Nothing is serious nowadays. At least nothing should be. Don't be so serious. Why so serious? Howard shook his head as he entered and followed Dorian into the library. There was a bright wood fire blazing in a large open hearth. The lamps were lit and an open Dutch silver spirit case stood, with some siphons of soda water and large cut glass tumblers on a little marqueterie table. Marqueterie is a French term meaning a decorative veneer inlaid with other wood or shells. That's the style of table that it was. You see, your servant made me quiet at home, Dorian. He gave me everything I wanted, including your best gold tip cigarettes. Like, a lot of the stuff is just pure and simple old-fashioned. Like, you might be able to find some of this stuff in, like, an antique shop, but they're souvenirs of a bygone era. Yeah, they're kind of like radios, and they just don't make them like that anymore. You see, your servant made me at home cigarettes. He is a most hospitable creature. I like him much better than the Frenchman you used to have. What did become of the Frenchman, by the by? Dorian shrugged his shoulders. I believe he married Lady Radley's maid and has established her in Paris as an English dressmaker. Anglomany is very fashionable over there now, I hear. It seems silly of the French, doesn't it? But do you know? He's not at all a bad servant. I never liked him, but I had nothing to complain about. One often imagines things that are quite absurd. He was really very devoted to me, and seemed quite sorry when he went away. Have another brandy and soda, or would you like hock and seltzer? Hock is white wine, often from the Rhine region of Germany. I always take hock and seltzer myself. There should be some in the next room. Thanks. I won't have anything more, said the painter, taking his cap and coat off and throwing them on the bag that he had placed in the corner. Oscar Wilde has very vivid imagery in his book. That's something that something I've seen and noticed throughout the passage of the book. As we progress. Okay. I want to speak to you seriously. Don't frown like that. You make it so much more difficult for me. What is it all about? Cried Dorian in his petulant way, flinging himself down on the sofa. Yeah, it's like, as we read about in chapter 11, Dorian is still trying to hide the portrait. He's trying to hide the cruel expression that the portrait has taken on as a result of his misdeed. And it's become a source of paranoia for him. Like, he's trying to hide it. And you can tell, like, based on his manner, that he's, and I often reference the Edgar Allan Poe. It's like, it's the beating of the hideous heart. Like, he's like still freaked out about that painting. I hope it's not about myself. I am tired of myself tonight. I should like to be somebody else. I think it's an interesting theme, wanting to step outside of your own identity. Something that's already been explored in the novel through Sybil Vane's character. She took on different roles. And something that I remarked on is that that's a good way for people to be someone else. Probably one of the biggest draws of acting, one of the biggest perks of acting, is that you don't have to be yourself. You can be someone else. And it seems like Dorian, he's tired of being himself. He's tired of being stuck as who he is. It is about yourself, answered Hallward in his grave, deep voice, and I must say it to you. I shall only keep you half an hour. Dorian sighed and lit a cigarette. Half an hour, he murmured. It is not much to ask of you, Dorian, and it's entirely for your own sake that I'm speaking. I think it right that you should know that the most dreadful things are being said against you in London. As you might recall, there's an inquest. They're trying to figure out to what extent Dorian is guilty of the death of Sybil Vane. She basically killed herself after Dorian said he was breaking up with her. And yeah, they're trying to see if he's guilty of her death. I don't wish to know anything about them. I love scandals about other people, but scandals about myself don't interest me. They've not got the charm of novelty. They must interest you, Dorian. Every gentleman is interested in his good name. You don't want people to talk to you as something violently degraded. Of course, you have your position and your wealth and all that kind of thing. Dorian is well-to-do. That was evidenced several times throughout the last chapter. He's got a lot of nice things, and they spend a significant amount of time talking about jewels and gems, as well as intricate designs. But position and wealth are not everything. Mind you, I don't believe these rumors at all. At least I can't believe them when I see you. Sin is a thing that writes itself across a man's face. It cannot be concealed. People talk sometimes of secret vices. There are no such things. If a wretched man has a vice, it shows itself in the lines of his mouth, and the droop of his eyelids, and the molding of his hands even. Somebody, I won't mention his name, but you know him, came to me last year to have his portrait done. I had never seen him before, and had never heard anything about him at the time, although I have heard a good deal since. He offered an extravagant price. I refused him. There was something in the shape of his fingers that I hated. I know now that I was quite right in what I fancied about him. His life is dreadful. But you, Dorian, with your pure, bright, innocent face and your marvelous, untroubled youth, I can't believe anything against you. It's like stress lines. Like, if you want a good example of this, a good example is probably in some of Vincent van Gogh's paintings. Like, take a look at the potato eaters. Like, when people have been through a lot, it tends to reflect in the way they look. Yeah. Sometimes even in the way people dress. Okay, let's see. His life is dreadful, but you, I can't believe anything. And yet I see you very seldom, and you never come down to the studio now. And when I'm away from you, I hear all these hideous things that people are whispering about you. I don't know what to say. It's like people are making up rumors and stuff about his whereabouts whenever he's not around. I think he's probably becoming more reclusive as a result of the portrait, as a result of the Sybil Vane incident. And yeah, it's hard to say what Basil Hallward knows about that incident. I believe it's... Yeah, he knows about her death, but he doesn't really know about... Yeah, he knows about Sybil Vane's death, but he doesn't know about the portrait itself. I don't know what to say. Why is it, Dorian, that a man like the Duke of Berwick leaves the room of a club when you enter it? Why is it that so many gentlemen in London will neither go to your house nor invite you to theirs? You used to be a friend of Lord Stavely. I met him at dinner last week. Your name happened to come up in conversation in connection with the miniatures you have lent to the exhibition at Dudley. That's an art collection of Lord Dudley exhibited to the public. Stavely curled his lip and said that you might have the most artistic tastes, but that you are a man whom no pure-minded girl should be allowed to know, and whom no chaste woman should sit in the same room with. I reminded him that I was a friend of yours, and asked him what he meant. He told me. He told me right out before everybody. It was horrible. Why is your friendship so fatal to young men? There was that wretched boy in the Guards who committed suicide. You were his great friend. There was Sir Henry Ashton, who had to leave England with a tarnished name. You and he were inseparable. What about Adrian Singleton and his dreadful end? How can one simple street swallow so many lives? I try to give credit where credit's due when I can. Chances blown, nothing's free. And yeah, this is a street called Dorian. The Offspring. The kids aren't alright, is the credit there. Okay. You and he were inseparable. What about Lord Kent's only son and his career? I met his father yesterday in St. James Street. He seemed broken with shame and sorrow. What about the young Duke of Perth? What sort of life has he got now? What gentleman would associate with him? Stop, Basil. You're talking about things of which you know nothing, said Dorian Gray, biting his lips, with a note of infinite contempt in his voice. You ask me why Berwick leaves a room when I enter it. It's because I know everything about his life. Not because he knows anything about mine. With such blood as he has in his veins, how could his record be clean? You asked me about Henry Ashton and young Perth. Did I teach the one his vices and the other his debauchery? If Kent's silly son takes his wife from the streets, what is that to me? If Adrian Singleton writes his friend's name across a bill, am I his keeper? I know how people chatter in England. The middle classes air their moral prejudices over their gross dinner tables. Whisper about what they call the profligacies of their betters in order to try and pretend that they are in smart society on intimate terms with people they slander. It's like you pretend like you're better than everybody else. In this country, it is enough for a man to have distinction and brains for every common tongue to wag against him. And what sort of lives do these people who pose as being moral lead themselves? My dear fellow, you forget that we are in the native land of the hypocrite. Dorian, cried Howard, that is not the question. England is bad enough, I know, And English society is all wrong. That is the reason why I want you to be fine. You've not been fine. One has the right to judge of a man by the effect he has over his friends. You are seen to lose all sense of honor, of goodness, of purity. It's like a ripple effect, a domino effect. It's like when one link in the chain changes, the entire chain changes as a result. As it's sometimes said, one bad apple ruins the bunch. One bad apple ruins the bunch. Let's see, where was I? They've gone down into the depths. You've led them there. Yes, you led them there, and yet you can smile as you're smiling now. And there's worse behind. I know you and Harry are inseparable. Surely for that reason, if for none other, you should not have made his sister's name a byword. Take care, Basil. You go too far. It's like you're barking up the wrong tree, buddy. Like, we have to remember that, kind of like what I said, like they've just continued getting farther and farther apart. It's hard to say if that's also true of Lord Henry's relationship to Dorian. But, yeah, he has not yet appeared in this chapter, so hard to say. I must speak and you must listen. You shall listen. When you met Lady Gwendolen, not a breath of scandal had ever touched her. Is there a single decent woman in London now whom would drive with her in the park? Why, even her children are not allowed to live with her. Then there are other stories. Stories that you've been seen creeping at dawn out of dreadful houses and slinking in disguise into the foulest dens in London. Are they true? Can they be true? When I first heard them, I laughed. I hear them now, and they make me shudder. What about your country house and the life that is led there? Dorian, you don't know what is said about you. I won't tell you that I don't want to preach to you. I remember Harry saying once that every man who turned himself into an amateur, curate for the moment, always began by saying that and then proceeded to break his word. I do want to preach to you. Basil's always been a kind of mentor to Dorian that Dorian doesn't listen to. Dorian has always listened to Lord Henry. Lord Henry's, I would say, less hopeful and less optimistic in comparison to Basil. I'm sorry, I got it mixed up. Basil's the more hopeful and optimistic alternative to the cold, cynic Lord Henry. Okay. Where am I? Yeah, I want you to lead such a life as will make the world respect you. I want you to have a clean name and a fair record. I want you to get rid of the dreadful people that you associate with. Don't shrug your shoulders like that. Don't be so indifferent. You have a wonderful influence. Let it be for good, not for evil. They say that you corrupt everyone with whom you become intimate, and that it's quite sufficient for you to enter a house for shame of some kind fall after. I don't know whether it is so or not. How should I know? But it is said of you. I'm told things that it seems impossible to doubt. Lord Gloucester was one of my greatest friends at Oxford. He showed me a letter that his wife had written to him when she was dying alone in her villa at Mentone. Your name was implicated in the most terrible confession I ever read. I told him that it was absurd, that I knew you thoroughly, and that you were incapable of anything of the kind. Know you? I wonder, do I know you? Before I can answer that, I should have to see your soul. Yeah, this can happen sometimes if you haven't seen someone for a really long period of time. It's like, do I even know you anymore? That's like Basil to Dorian right now. Do I even know you anymore? To see my soul, muttered Dorian Gray, standing up from the sofa and turning almost white with fear. Yeah, again, Basil doesn't. I don't think he knows about the painting. Yes, answered Howard gravely and with deep toned sorrow in his voice. To see your soul. But only God can do that. A bitter laugh of mockery broke from the lips of the younger man. You shall see it yourself tonight, he cried, seizing a lamp from the table. Come. It is your own handiwork. It looks like Dorian's finally ready. He's finally ready to show the painting to Basil. Why shouldn't you look at it? You can tell the world all about it. You could tell the world all about it afterward if you choose. Nobody would believe you. If they did believe you, they would like me all the better for it. I know the age better than you do, that you have prayed about it so tediously. Come, I tell you. You've chattered enough about corruption. Now you should look on it face to face. There was the madness of pride in every word he uttered. He stamped his foot upon the ground in his boyish, insolent manner. He felt a terrible joy at the thought that someone else was to share his secret, and the man who had painted the portrait that was the origin of all his shame was to be burdened for the rest of his life with that hideous memory of what he had done. Yeah, there's a weird shift of blame that's happening. Alright, hold on, let me open the blinds so I can get more sun in. Okay. Yeah, there's a weird shift of blame. It's like he's saying, I might have done the bad thing that changed the painting, but you were the one who created the painting, so it's your fault. Yes, he continued, coming closer to him and looking steadfastly into his stern eyes. I shall show you my soul. You shall see the thing that you fancy only God can see. It's kind of like a mood ring in a way that permanently changes based on what he does. Yeah. Howard started back. This is blasphemy, Dorian, he cried. You must not say things like that. They are horrible and they don't mean anything. You think so? He laughed again. I know so. As for what I've said to you tonight, I said it for your good. You know I've always been a stanch friend to you. Don't touch me. Finish what you have to say. A twisted flash of pain shot across the painter's face. He paused for a moment, and a wild feeling of pity came over him. After all, what right had he to pry into the life of Dorian Gray? If he had done a tithe of what was rumored about him, how much he must have suffered. Then he straightened himself up and walked over to the fireplace, and stood there looking at the burning logs with their frost-like ashes and their throbbing cores of flame. I am waiting, Basil, said the young man in a hard, clear voice. He turned round. What I have to say is this, he cried. You must give me some answer to these horrible charges that are made against you. If you tell me that they're absolutely untrue from beginning to end, I shall believe you. Deny them, Dorian. Deny them. Can't you see what I'm going through? My God. Don't tell me that you're bad and corrupt and shameful. It's like set the record straight. Dorian Gray smiled. There was a curl of contempt in his lips. Come upstairs, Basil, he said quietly. I keep a diary of my life from day to day, and it never leaves the room in which it's written. I shall show it to you if you come with me. I shall come with you, Dorian, if you wish it. I see I have missed my train. That makes no matter. I can go tomorrow, but don't ask me to read anything tonight. All I want is a plain answer to my question. That shall be given to you upstairs. I cannot give it here. You will not have to read long. And yeah, that was the end of chapter 12. I'd have to say one of the shorter chapters in the book. I think the last chapter was 20 pages long. Let's take a quick peek into the next chapter. It looks like chapter 13 is pretty short too, so I can go ahead and read chapter 13 too. And then I guess the plan for today will be to stop at chapter 14. Yeah, we're almost to the end. There are 20 chapters total. He passed out of the room and began the ascent. Basil Hallward following close behind. We're in chapter 13. They walked softly as men do instinctively at night. Yeah. The night time. Yeah, it seems like that's just how it is. I guess the reason for that is out of hunting instinct. It's harder to see at night. It's easier to detect by sound. The lamp cast fantastic shadows on the wall and staircase. A rising wind made some of the windows rattle. When they reached the top landing, Dorian set the lamp down on the floor, and taking out the key, turned it in the lock. "You insist on knowing, Basil?" he asked in a low voice. "Yes." "I am delighted," he answered, smiling. Then he added somewhat harshly, "You are the one man in the world who is entitled to know everything about me. You've had more to do with my life than you think." Basil has historically been one of Dorian's biggest advocates. Like Dorian was the light of his life, and he made the beautiful paintings about Dorian, and he's tried to support Dorian in spite of some of the mistakes that he's made in the past. "You have had more to do with my life than you think." And taking up the lamp, he opened the door and went in. A cold current of air passed them, and the light shot up for a moment in a flame of murky orange. He shuddered. "Shut the door behind you," he whispered as he placed the lamp on the table. Howard glanced round him with a puzzled expression. The room looked as if it had not been lived in for years. A faded Flemish tapestry, a curtain picture, an old Italian cassone, and an almost empty bookcase. That was all that it seemed to contain besides a chair and a table. As Dorian Gray was lighting a half-burned candle that was standing on the mantel shelf, he saw that the whole was covered with dust, and that the carpet was in holes. A mouse ran shuffling behind the wainscoting. There was a damp odor of mildew. "So you think that it's only God who sees the soul, Basil? Draw that curtain back, and you will see mine." He's about to see this gnarly painting of Dorian. Basil's gonna be like, "Oh God, what happened?" The voice that spoke was cold and cruel. "You are mad, Dorian, or playing a part," muttered Hallward, frowning. "You won't." "Then I must do it myself," said the young man, and he tore the curtain from its rod and flung it on the ground. An exclamation of horror broke from the painter's lips as he saw in the dim light the hideous face on the canvas grinning at him. It's like cue Psycho strings. It's like, whoa. Howard's like, "Oh God, no." I mean, it could almost be like a jump scare in a way, depending on how freaking ugly it is. There was something in its expression that filled him with disgust and loathing. Yeah. Good heavens. It was Dorian Gray's own face that he was looking at. The horror, whatever it was, had not yet entirely spoiled that marvelous beauty. There was still some gold in the thinning hair and some scarlet on the sensual mouth. The sodden eyes had kept something of the loveliness of their blue, and noble curves had not yet completely passed away from the chiseled nostrils and from the plastic throat. Yes, it was Dorian himself. But who had done it? He seemed to recognize his own brushwork, and the frame was his own design. The idea was monstrous, yet he felt afraid. He seized the lighted candle, and he held it to the picture. In the left-hand corner was his own name, traced in long letters of bright vermilion. He had another opportunity to see it earlier in time, but Dorian wanted to keep it a secret. It was some foul parody, some infamous, ignoble satire. He had never done that. Still, it was his own picture. He knew it, and he felt as if his blood had changed in a moment from fire to sluggish ice. His own picture. What did it mean? Why had it altered? He turned and looked at Dorian Gray with his eyes of a sick man. His mouth twitched, and his parched tongue seemed unable to articulate. He passed his hand across his forehead. It was dank with clammy sweat. Yeah, I guess. It's kind of like, it's like, hey, come over here, take a look at this, and it's like a dead animal or something like that. So you see it, and it's like, ew, gross. Except in this case, it's his ugly painting that has changed as a result of his actions. The young man was leaning against the mantel shelf, watching him with that strange expression that one sees on the faces of those who are absorbed in a play when some great artist is acting. There was neither real sorrow in it nor real joy. There was simply the passion of the spectator, with perhaps a flicker of triumph in his eyes. He had taken the flower out of his coat and was smelling it, or pretending to do so. "What does this mean?" cried Howard at last. His own voice sounded shrill and curious in his ears. "Years ago, when I was a boy," said Dorian Gray, crushing the flower in his hand, "you met me, flattered me, and taught me to be vain of my good looks. One day you introduced me to a friend of yours who explained to me the wonder of youth, and you finished a portrait of me that revealed to me the wonder of beauty. In a mad moment that, even now, I don't know whether I regret it or not, I made a wish. Perhaps you'd call it a prayer. I remember it. Oh, how well I remember it. No, the thing is impossible. The room is damp. Mildew has gotten into the canvas. The paints I used had some wretched mineral poison in them. I tell you, the thing is impossible." Basil's speculating here that it's age, or maybe the oils in the paint are changing over time. "What's impossible?" murmured the young man, going over to the window and leaning his forehead against the cold, mist-stained glass. As we might recall, Dorian's wish was that he could preserve his youth and beauty, and the painting would age and decay in his place. "You told me you had destroyed it. I was wrong. It had destroyed me. I don't believe it's my picture." "Can't you see your ideal in it?" said Dorian bitterly. "My ideal, as you call it. As you called it. There is nothing evil in it, nothing shameful. You were to me such an ideal as I shall never meet again. The snow-covered hill. This is the face of a satyr. It is the face of my soul. Christ, what a thing I must have worshipped. It is the eyes of a devil. Each of us has heaven and hell in him, Basil," cried Dorian with a wild gesture of despair. Howard turned again to the portrait and gazed at it. "My God, if it's true," he exclaimed, "and this is what you've done with your life, why, you must be worse, even than those who talk against you fancy you to be." He held his light up against the canvas and examined it. The surface seemed to be quite undisturbed as he had left it. It was from within, apparently, that the foulness and horror had come. Through some strange quickening of inner life, the leprosies of sin were slowly eating the thing away. The rotting of a corpse in a watery grave was not so fearful. His hand shook, and the candle fell from its socket on the floor and lay there sputtering. He placed his foot on it and put it out. Then he flung himself into the rickety chair that was standing by the table and buried his face in his hands. "Good God, Dorian, what a lesson! What an awful lesson!" There was no answer, but he could hear the young man sobbing at the window. "Pray, Dorian, pray," he murmured. "What is it that one has taught to say in one's boyhood? Lead us not into temptation. Forgive us our sins." I believe it's "but deliver us from evil." Something like that. "Wash away our iniquities." Let us say that together. "The prayer of your pride has been answered. The prayer of your repentance will be answered also. I worshipped you too much. I am punished for it. You worshipped yourself too much. We are both punished." Dorian Gray turned slowly around and looked at him with tear-dimmed eyes. "It's too late, Basil," he faltered. "Say, go on without me." "It's never too late, Dorian. Let us kneel down and try if we can not to remember a prayer. Isn't there a verse somewhere? Though your sins be as scarlet, yet I'll make them as white as snow." This is a reference from the Bible, Isaiah 1:18. "Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they be red like crimson, they shall be as wool." The prayer that's being referenced is Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. I can't remember all the words. Give us this daily bread and deliver us. I'm sorry, and I think it's, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Yeah, it's Our Father is the name of the prayer. Those words mean nothing to me now. Hush, don't say that. You've done enough evil in your life. My God, don't you see that accursed thing leering at us? Dorian Gray glanced at the picture, and suddenly an uncontrollable feeling of hatred for Basil Hallward came over him, as though it had been suggested to him by the image on the canvas, whispered into his ear by those grinning lips. The mad passions of a hunted animal stirred within him, and he loathed the man who was seated at the table more than in his whole life he'd ever loathed anything. It's kind of like Basil Hallward is the one holding up the mirror to Dorian, and Dorian's looking in it and he sees his ugly reflection. He glanced wildly around. Something glimmered on the top of the painted chest that faced him. His eye fell on it. He knew what it was. It was a knife that he'd brought up some days before to cut a piece of cord and had forgotten to take it away with him. He moved slowly toward it, passing Hallward as he did so. As soon as he got behind him, he seized it and turned around. Hallward stirred in his chair as if he was going to rise. He rushed at him and dug the knife into the great vein that is behind the ear, crushing the man's head down on the table and stabbing again and again. Dorian, what are you doing, dude? There was a stifled groan and the horrible sound of someone choking with blood. 3 times the outstretched arms shot up convulsively, waving grotesque, stiff-fingered hands in the air. He stabbed him twice more, but the man did not move. Something began to trickle on the floor. He waited for a moment, still pressing the head down. Then he threw the knife on the table and listened. He could hear nothing but the drip on the threadbare carpet. He opened the door and went out on the landing. The house was absolutely quiet. No one was about. For a few seconds he stood bending over the balustrade and peering down into the black, seething well of darkness. Then he took out the key and returned to the room, locking himself in as he did so. You just murdered Basil, Dorian. What are you doing? The thing was still seated in the chair, straining over the table with bowed head and humped back and long, fantastic arms. Had it not been for the red, jagged tear in the neck and the clotted black pool that was slowly widening on the table, one would have said the man was simply asleep. How quickly it had all been done. He felt strangely calm, and walking over to the window, opened it and stepped out onto the balcony. The wind had blown the fog away, and the sky was like a monstrous peacock's tail, starred with myriads of golden eyes. It's like on the road on the highway to hell. He looked down and saw the policeman going his rounds and flashing the long beam of his lantern on the doors of the silent houses. The crimson spot of a prowling hansom gleamed at the corner and then vanished. A woman in fluttering shawl was creeping slowly by the railing, staggering as she went. Now and then she stopped and peered back. When she began to sing in a hoarse voice, the policeman strolled over and said something to her. She stumbled away, laughing. A bitter blast swept across the square. The gas lamps flickered and became blue, and the leafless trees shook their black iron branches to and fro. Again, like very vivid imagery from Oscar Wilde. He shivered and went back, closing the window behind him. Like, I know exactly how the night looked based on Oscar Wilde's writing. Having reached the door, he turned the key and opened it. He did not even glance at the murdered man. He felt that the secret of the whole thing was not to realize the situation. The friend who had painted the fatal portrait, to which all his misery had been due, had gone out of his life. That was enough. Then he remembered the lamp. It was a rather curious one of Moorish workmanship, native dull silver inlaid with arabesques of burnished steel and studded with coarse turquoises. Perhaps it might be missed by his servant, and questions would be asked. Now he's got to start disposing of evidence. He hesitated for a moment, then he turned back and took it from the table. He could not help seeing the dead thing, how still it was, how horribly white the long hands looked. It was like a dreadful wax image. Having locked the door behind him, he crept quietly downstairs. The woodwork creaked and seemed to cry out as if in pain. He stopped several times and waited. No, everything was still. It was merely the sound of his own footsteps. When he reached the library, he saw the bag and coat in the corner. They must be hidden away somewhere. He unlocked a secret press, closet or cupboard, that was in the wainscoting, a press in which he kept his own curious disguises and put them into it. He could easily burn them afterward. Then he pulled out his watch. It was 20 minutes to 2. He sat down and began to think. Every year, every month, almost, men were strangled in England for what he had done. I think they hanged men back then, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I don't know if they had the electric chair at that time. There had been a madness of murder in the air. Some red star had come too close to the earth, and yet what evidence was there against him? Yeah, I'm not even entirely sure if there's still the inquest open against Dorian at this time. I didn't want him for both. Basil Howard had left the house at 11. No one had seen him come in again. Most of the servants were at Selby Royal. His valet had gone to bed. Paris, yes, it was to Paris that Basil had gone, by the midnight train as he had intended. With his curious, reserved habits, it would be months before any suspicions would be aroused. Months. Everything could be destroyed long before then. A sudden thought struck him. He put on his fur coat and hat and went out into the hall. There he paused, hearing the slow, heavy tread of the policeman on the pavement outside, and seeing the flash of the bullseye reflected in the window. The bullseye is a lantern sided with glass. He waited and held his breath. After a few moments, he drew back the latch and slipped out, shutting the door very gently behind him. Then he began ringing the bell. In about 5 minutes, his valet appeared, half-dressed, looking very drowsy. "I'm sorry to wake you up, Francis," he said, stepping in, "but I had forgotten my latchkey. What time is it?" 10 minutes past 2, sir," answered the man, looking at the clock and blinking. 10 minutes past 2? How horribly late. You must wake me at 9 tomorrow. I have some work to do. All right, sir. Did anyone call this evening? Mr. Howard, sir. He stayed here till 11, and then he went away to catch his train. Oh, I'm sorry I didn't see him. Did he leave any message? No, sir, except that he would write to you from Paris if he did not find you at the club. That will do, Francis. Don't forget to call me at 9 tomorrow. No, sir. The man shambled down the passage in his slippers. Dorian Gray threw his hat and coat upon the table and passed into the library. For a quarter of an hour he walked up and down the room, biting his lip and thinking. Then he took down the blue book, that's the Society Directory, from one of the shelves and began to turn over the leaves. Alan Campbell, 152 Hertford Street, Mayfair. Yes, that was the man he wanted. Okay, that was the end of chapter 13. Yeah, wow. So, Dorian started with a breakup. And now he's a murderer. Chapter 13. Chapters 12 and 13 we covered today. Dorian. I hope you've enjoyed following along with me in Pictures of Dorian Gray. We are getting closer to the end now. We've only got about 6 chapters left in the book. I'll definitely be looking at different options for stream content in the future. I might have more IRL type streams. I might have more music streams. Feel free to drop any suggestions you may have in the suggestion box. You can also drop any questions you have in chat. And we can even have a Q&A or something like that where I can reply to questions that you guys ask. Give my thoughts on different topics and issues. Different takes. Music streams are still on pause, but I think I'll try to start having music and just chatting streams again. Exercise streams again would be nice, but they might not resume until next week. As always, thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting the show. I hope you enjoyed today's readings from Dorian Gray. Definitely a lot more action in the last 2 chapters. Chapter 11 was more of a hyper focus on Dorian, and now we're seeing more crimes being committed by Dorian. So who knows what he's going to do by the end of this. Is he going to try to make the slate clean, so to speak? Is he going to try to make up for his misdeeds? Or is he going to continue speeding down the highway to hell, keep killing people, full on demon barber, Sweeney Todd style? I don't know, we're gonna have to wait and see. Maybe Lord Henry's gonna be able to talk some sense into him. Like, get yourself together, Dorian. You used to be like Leonardo DiCaprio, and now you're, Joe Blow serial killer. Get your stuff together. Alright, stay tuned for the next episode of Stormer Show. Thank you for watching. Signing off.